Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. I will be at Fantastic Fest right here in beautiful Austin, Texas, September 18th through the 25th. It's a great time. There's always a lot of fantastic genre movies out there. Our friends at Ghoulish Books are going to be having their Ghoulish Book Fair, where they will sell books out of the Highball Bar right there in the Alamo Drafthouse, South Lamar. It's a great time. I always spend too much money at the book fair. I always spend too much money buying snacks when I watch movies, but I love it. I will be covering the fest for Dread Central and Pop Heist and possibly a couple of other places. I don't know. The point is, I will be there. So if you're a listener of the show and you're going to Fantastic Fest, say hi. I'll be the guy who looks like me and has a badge around my neck with my name on it. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I know that friend of the show, Clay McLeod Chapman, will be there with his new movie because he's the busiest man in horror. Max Booth will be there with Ghoulish Books. I'm looking forward to seeing some other friends, some colleagues, some cool people that I may invite on as future guests of this show. We'll see. So yeah, September 18th through 25th, I'll be there. Say hi to me if you see me. We have got a great show for you this week. Rachel Harrison is back for her second visit to this podcast. We're grateful to Rachel for making the time. Her new book is out this week. It's called Play Nice. It's really good. You should get it. We're going to talk to Rachel about that, and we're going to talk about one of the most famous haunted house stories of all time, the Amityville Horror. We talk about the original story, the book, the film adaptation, the franchise that grew out of it, Ed and Lorraine Warren, a bunch of stuff. It's kind of all Amityville, the whole scope of everything that the Amityville Horror has meant over the last, 50 some odd years of American popular culture. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to head right over there right now to check it out. Let's head over to our interview with Rachel Harrison. This week on The Scares That Shaped Us is one of our favorites. She's the best-selling author of books like Cackle, Such Sharp Teeth, So Thirsty, The Return, and more. Her latest book, Play Nice, is in stores everywhere September 9th. Rachel Harrison, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. It's great to have you, and I'm going to just throw a little, not that we need an icebreaker question, but I'm going to throw an icebreaker question out anyway, because I just remembered this last night. What is it like to walk into a room at a convention and realize that Clay McLeod Chapman has disguised himself as a chair in order to scare you?
He genuinely startled me, but I think he got a little bit of blowback from people who were like, that was mean. But like, we have almost like a sibling relationship, so it was totally fine with me. I wouldn't expect anything less, and life would be boring without Clay McLeod Chapman.
It's true. It's very true. I just found out a couple days ago that Clay has a movie premiering at Fantastic Fest here in Austin in late September. So I get to see him in movie premiere mode when he comes to town. So that's going to be fun for everybody. It definitely won't cause any explosions or anything like that.
Yeah, just check the chairs. Just keep an eye out.
I have to check every chair.
He'll come out of the wallpaper. You never know.
For those who don't know, like this is a thing that happened at StokerCon 2025, which I was not at StokerCon 2025, but there's video of Clay taking one of the coverings off the chairs in a room and draping himself in it and sitting down and waiting for Rachel to come in
and then jumping out at me.
we love Clay. Life would be boring without Clay. But before we get to our story today, and there's probably going to be a little blending here in the conversation because I do think the influence is pretty clear. I want to talk to you about Play Nice. I had so much fun reading this one. It is sort of it is a classic Rachel Harrison narrative, and yet it is something that you've never done before. For anyone who doesn't know yet, could you give us a little taste of what Play Nice is?
Sure. So Play Nice is about Cleo. She's a fashion influencer and stylist who kind of leads this picture perfect life in New York City, which is by design, because growing up, her life was anything but pretty. Her parents went through a really like nasty, messy divorce, and her mom moved into a house that she claimed was possessed by a demon. and kind of spiraled from there and lost custody of Cleo and her sisters, Daphne and Lita. And they became estranged, and Cleo finds out now that her mother has unexpectedly passed away and the house has passed down to her. And she sees it as like an opportunity for house flipping content and to kind of make this ugly memory something pretty. And when she goes to the house, she discovers a copy of the Amityville Horror style book that her mom wrote years ago, and it's annotated for Cleo. So as she kind of spends more time in the house and starts reading this book, she begins to like unravel what what might have actually happened back then and what might actually be happening now, and realizing there might be some truth to her mother's story.
Yeah, it definitely has Amityville horror vibes, which we'll talk about a lot, I'm sure. It also feels like a nice companion to me for books of yours, like Such Sharp Teeth and Black Sheep, books that are kind of about going home and unpacking all of the weirdness of your childhood. Um, but uh, it has so many layers to the way that it reminded me too of Grady Hendrix's How to Sell a Haunted House, the way that you just keep discovering new layers to this absolute mess that this family is in. um what was the start of the book for you?
The start of the book really was Amityville. And we'll talk about it more, just my fascination with Amityville. But I was also kind of going through this phase where I was unpacking a lot of I was coming of age in the early aughts, and I was a preteen teenager when the kind of blogs and tabloids and were really at a peak with, Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears just kind of tearing down these young women, and kind of how I internalized that and how easily we believe we're just so quick to point and say, oh, well, she's crazy, she's crazy, she's crazy, and not, like I think about Amy Winehouse a lot, and to not ask why or to decide. And I see it now in a different way with like Meghan Markle and Chapel Roan, where we're kind of as a society are deciding, do we like them? Because if we like them, that's going to determine how we talk about them and how we treat them. And so thinking a lot about likability and the crazy woman trope, which is so fitting for a haunted house story. And so kind of all of those things together became Play Nice.
Well, it's interesting that we talk. I mean, for those who weren't around during that time, because I remember quite clearly that basically every day there would be a news story about what Britney Spears had eaten at the drive-through the night before. Like
Yep.
if she went to Taco Bell, you were going to get a story about her going to Taco Bell with quotes from a nutritionist explaining why she shouldn't be going to Taco Bell. And it was just insane. And I think that it's also interesting for me as someone who follows you on social media and knows you a little bit, that you are, I think, as a layperson in this world, very very good at Instagram. You have a very good grasp of what to put forth of yourself on that platform and how to make it entertaining and nice and attractive to everyone. um and that is this whole new sphere of that sort of celebrity culture and figuring out if you like someone or don't like someone, and then you took all of that and put it into Clio. And I'm just curious, for you, now that you've been in the public eye for a few years, like how has that part of your life reshaped how you write?
I think it really hasn't, because you can't let it. I remember after Cackle came out, Such Sharp Teeth was already done, and I started writing Black Sheep. And I remember having a chip on my shoulder because everyone was saying, oh, well, Cackle isn't horror. She doesn't write horror, whatever. And I was like, well, I'm going to make Black Sheep bleak and scary. And then I wrote a draft of the Black Sheep as that version, and it was just life. It was soulless. So I scrapped it and started over and wrote the book that I wanted to write. And that taught me that you can't listen to outside voices. And I didn't have Instagram before I became an author. So it's only ever been a space where I'm putting forth my author self. And you have to find the line of wanting to be genuine and feel genuine. And I don't feel good about anything. Like I'm not going to post if I don't feel good about it or if it feels like BS, but also not giving like keeping some stuff private. And I think it's interesting because now all of the like vitriol from the tabloids and blogs has just sort of moved to comment sections for people. And I deal with it on a very small level because of, I'm kind of niche, but it's just interesting to be like, we've come so far as a society, and then to just like go on like any like young famous person's Instagram and scroll through the comments and be like, no, we're still all full of hate and awful.
Well, and this also is at the same time as you're talking about Cleo and her sort of new way of putting herself out there and thinking in that everything is content mindset. You also have uh, Alexandra, Cleo's mother, has written this tell-all book about this possession. That is a fun thing in the novel, that every time someone talks about, oh, your house is haunted, someone has to say, no, possessed.
Yeah.
That was the problem with our house, which just adds a fun layer to it. But it was very much this trend in the wake of Amityville. Amityville was kind of the launch pad for it, but you still get these stories about like here is our story of what went on in this house, and everyone gets to pick apart what that experience is for everyone. And we'll talk about this more when we talk about Amityville. Were like true life ghost accounts and first person haunting accounts and things like that, were those a staple of your like growing horror fandom as a young person? Not
I
that you're
think
not a young person
no,
now. Sorry,
I
that was a weird
appreciate
way to
that.
phrase that.
Now that you're an old tag, no, I know you're kidding. Um, I I liked like lore and folklore and things like that, but I was a late comer to horror. And I
Mm.
remember like when I was in my early 20s, I got really into this show called Celebrity Ghost Stories. And it's
Uh-huh.
so like, I don't know why I find it so fascinating. I think because like performers are good storytellers and they'll do these like little reenactments. So that like those true life accounts were always interesting to me and kind of, you know, I love a ghost story. I love hearing if somebody goes someplace and they think it's haunted and things like that. But um, growing up, I would kind of avoid that stuff because I was too scared.
Well, I want to talk specifically on like a craft level about the book within the book for just a second, because I love that stuff, and we'll talk about it more as we get into talking about Amityville. But I love the haunted house memoir subgenre. And so you have this really fun thing in Play Nice where Cleo finds this book and opens it, and we get, not only do we get to read bits of the book, we get to read Alex's annotations that are written specifically, just little notes to Cleo to try to explain like, well, this is what I was thinking when I said this, and this is what was actually going on that you maybe don't remember. And it plays with this wonderful tension of memory and what we think we remember versus what it really happened, and the way that it shapes people. Um, did you read anything to prepare for like writing that kind of haunted house memoir, or did you just kind of let Alex go? Like, is there a separate little like planning document where you're like, this is Play Nice, and then this is Alex's book within Play Nice?
So I read the Amityville Horror to kind of like get a feel for what a book like that would be like because I don't recall ever reading a book like that before, and kind of Amityville was the blueprint. And then I was a little nervous because I've never played with form like this before in my career, and so but I just did what I always do and kind of write from start to finish. And because every excerpt has to play within the larger narrative, and I thought if I broke it out, then they're not playing on each other the same way. Where if I switch, then I'm kind of thinking about where Cleo is and how the book within the book kind of gets under her skin and pushes her narrative forward. So I wrote it all chronologically. I didn't have a separate document, but getting into the book within a book space, it was fun because I could kind of get a little bit campy with it because, just on the blueprint of Amityville, that book is so outrageous that I felt like the book within the book gave me freedom to kind of experiment and go a little bit scarier and go a little bit wackier because I usually try and ground my novels in reality. But the book within the book, I could kind of get away with more. And like I didn't throw away like caring about the prose, but I was like, it's the prose for me is less important in the book within the book because I'm doing something intentionally where it's like a pulp novel and not like I'm not holding myself up to my standards. I'm holding myself up to the standards of like a pulp paperback that someone would pick up that's like, this is a true story. So,
Yes. Well, we've been dancing around it a little bit, but since these two things are so intertwined, I want to go ahead and shift over. We're going to talk about the Amityville Horror today, everybody. And when Rachel and I like started to plan this conversation, Rachel was very clear that she wanted to sort of talk about all of it, the whole sort of scope of what that one possibly true, possibly not true story in the 70s has done to like the paranormal. And so we're just going to kind of go from the beginning. Um, Rachel, I know you are a Jersey girl,
yes.
and this obviously is a story that unfolded on Long Island. So, how early was your exposure to any version of this story? Was it something that you knew about as a child?
No, so when I was either 14 or 15. My best friend in high school, Deanna, her mother, Lauren, is from Long Island and from
Mm.
not far from the Amityville house. And I forget how it happened, but I remember like sitting around their kitchen island and Lauren saying the scariest movie I've ever seen was the Amityville Horror. And her telling us like we would drive by the house, me and my friends, because when she was a teenager when it came out, and that sticking in my mind. And then not too long after, the Ryan Reynolds remake came out, and my friend Deanna was in love with Ryan Reynolds. So like I think we went to the theaters to see it, or maybe we rented it at Blockbuster after it came out. I forget. But that was and then I didn't go back and watch the original until later. But what always interested me about that story is there's so many different layers to it. And you have the real tragedy, which of the DeFeo family murder, and the kind of mystery around that and the lore around that and whether, you know, did Ronald DeFeo Jr. do it by himself? How come nobody woke up from the gunshots and all of that kind of true crimey stuff. Then you have the Lutz family that comes in, and maybe some of what they experienced is true, maybe it's not. But I always thought about how those kids, Kathy's three children and George's stepchildren, did they believe that it was true? Did the parents tell them it was true? And even if it wasn't, and so now because they didn't want the kids saying like, yeah, that was bullshit, or did they force the kids to lie? Those are kind of the three options,
Yeah.
and all of them are bad. And so I
Yes.
I always thought about like how did they grow up and like have these like when you're 7 years old, if your mom's like there's a ghost in your attic, like you're gonna believe that and you're gonna hear
Mhm.
noises. Like so I just always wondered like when they grew up, how did that affect them? And if it was a hoax, how cruel it was of the parents to put that on the kids. And then you have the movies on top of it. And then you have the reboots and all of the now podcasts. And there's actually a really good documentary. I started watching it. It's on Prime. That's like Amityville Origin, and it kind of digs deeper into all of the story. But yeah, like what it must be like one for those kids, and two for you know I feel for the DeFeo family and their relatives that their tragic deaths have been kind of swept over and, you know, people don't talk, they sensationalize their deaths instead of respecting them and kind of putting them under this umbrella of like a ghost story. And I think that's tragic too.
Yeah. It's for those who might not know, and like this is going back 5 decades at this point. So you probably do know if you're the kind of person who listens to this podcast, but just in case, in 1974, a guy named Ronald DeFeo Jr. Shot and killed his parents and all of his siblings in this house in Amityville, New York. And he was later arrested and convicted and eventually died in prison. But 13 months after that, which it's fun that it's 13 months.
Yeah.
That's almost too cute. Um, the Lutz family moves into the same house because they got a great deal on the house where a sextuple homicide happened, and all the furnishings were still in there. They got a deal on the furnishings. They move in. 28 days later, they flee the house and say that house is evil and we cannot live there. And then 2 years after that, there's this book by Jay Anson, which comes out that's called The Amityville Horror. And I, my first exposure to the story was that book because I found it. I had definitely heard of the Amityville Horror, but when I was 15 or 16 or something like that, I found the book in a used bookstore, and it was the book. I don't know if it was a first edition or like a second printing, or it might have been a book club edition, which was which is a cool thing about used bookstores. You get those little miniature hardcover book club editions, but it had the flies and stuff on the cover and
Mm.
the little forked devil tail hanging off the letters, and I was like, I got to read this. I got to take this home. And I was enraptured. Like there are only two horror novels from that period in my life that I remember just sitting down and reading and not being able to put down. And one is this one and the other is The Exorcist. Because as you alluded to, that book is nuts. It is it is and it's the idea is that George and Kathy Lutz, the parents and the family that moved into this house just told their story. Like they sat down for hours and recounted what happened to Jay Anson, who then went and wrote this book. And he writes it in a very novelistic style. There is no like uh this is what George and Kathy told me about the flies in the playroom. It was just George goes and does this. He chops firewood. He chops more firewood. He chops even more firewood. And
There's
it
so much in the books, in the movies, so much wood chopping. Wood chopping is a huge part of the Amityville story.
it really is. And it reads very much like this like descent into absolute hell. And reading it as a teenager, I was like, holy shit, this all happened? How how do we not know? How are we not talking about this all the time? If this all happened and you're telling me it's true. And of course, now I look at it and it reads like a carnival funhouse. It's just every other page. Like what freaky thing can we think of this time to throw in there?
Exactly. And there's a big part of the book too is the priest who is asked to come bless the
Yes.
house, and he gets sick and can't go to the house, and all this back and forth with the priest, which was a big influence on Play Nice as well. But it's it's interesting because if you read between the lines, and I believe Stephen King said, and I don't know if he said it about the book or the movie, that it's an allegory for financial hardship of
Hmm.
homeownership. But like George, so George is like the one who's affected by the house the most.
Yeah.
And then arguably, Missy, who's the youngest daughter, she has this imaginary friend named Jody, who is like a pig creature. And they see hoof prints in the snow and all this. But it seems like George, I like made a note. George says that like the kids, as soon as he moves into the house, the children bothered him too. Ever since the move, they seem to have become little brats, misbehaved monsters who wouldn't listen. unruly children who must be severely punished. And I was like, so George and Kathy weren't, I don't believe they were married for that long before this. And I'm like, I wonder if he was just like, they moved into the house and he became abusive. Like, there's like weird, like, it's just like these these kind of things that are implied. And if you read between the lines, you're like, something about this feels icky. And it's not the horror part, it's the family dynamic part.
So, did you ever watch the documentary? It's just called My Amityville Horror.
No.
Okay. So it's streaming now. I forget exactly where it's streaming, but it is about Daniel Lutz, who was the oldest of Kathy's three children.
Oh, that's interesting because I think is it Michael or Christopher? I think it's Christopher. The second oldest is in the documentary I was watching.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm curious. So
See,
tell me what happened.
I haven't seen your documentary.
All right.
It is Daniel Lutz in his 40s or something like that. This was made in the 2000s, so I'm not sure exactly. I would think 40s to 50s. But as an adult man who has been through a lot of rough stuff in his life, he's clearly traumatized by the way his life turned out. And he starts going to therapists and talking to this documentarian and trying to unpack uh everything that happened to him and all of the emotional baggage that he's still carrying from this. And it centers almost entirely on George. It is to the point that he essentially not explicitly necessarily, but in the course of the documentary, he kind of blames the haunting on George, which is interesting. He basically says, you know, people don't know this, but George would read occult books and he
Yeah.
would study things about moving objects with his mind and stuff like that. And he was very much a disciplinarian, and he made me call him sir and all this stuff, and he was really nasty to us. And I think that the combination, like his theory was that the combination of the trauma from in the house from the DeFeo murders, coupled with George's interest in the occult and his behavior toward the children, sort of incited some kind of thing. Because that's the other interesting thing. Daniel Lutz believes that the haunting happened.
So does his younger brother,
Yeah.
which I found interesting. But yeah, George. So George was a Vietnam vet.
Hmm.
He came back and got really into motorcycles. And he also got really into transcendental meditation. And like he, at first, the kids all really liked him. And then he, it's interesting because him and Kathy like went on a TV show and were like, we've never heard anything about the occult. We don't know anything about the occult.
Yeah.
But one of George's motorcycle buddies said, like, before they moved into the house, they knew a guy from the motorcycle club who had written occult books and had like an occult, like all of these occult objects at his house. And George spent significant time with him. So it's interesting that he later denies it. And Chris, I believe it's Christopher. I keep calling him Christopher, but the middle son said that he believes that through transcendental meditation, George summoned like some kind of evil spirit. So,
It is Christopher, by the way.
okay,
I
okay.
just went and double checked you, so you got it.
All right.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. Like you said, there are so many layers. The way that it is now unpacked. Um, and we should talk about like the this was a media sensation in the late 70s. Like they like you said, George and Kathy would be on TV shows. This was a case, one of the cases that put Ed and Lorraine Warren on the map. They went and investigated it. In my Amityville Horror, there's actually a very sweet kind of odd scene where Daniel goes to Lorraine's house. Ed has passed away by this point, but he goes and talks to Lorraine and tries to sort of make sense of what she thinks of it. There's a really interesting part there where because Lorraine, they were very Christian, the Warrens, very devout, and she does this thing where she's going to do some kind of prayer, and she asks the whole documentary crew if they believe in God, and Daniel gets flat out combative and says, like, everybody here better say they believe in God, or I'm gonna have words with you. And
Ugh.
there are a couple of guys on the crew that are just like, I'm agnostic, like I don't discount the possibility of God, but I don't. And he gets like really testy with them and wants to like I'm going to talk to you after if you don't believe in God. But it was everywhere. And then all of a sudden there's this movie, which the original movie came out in 79, stars James Brolin and Margot Kidder and Rod Steiger as the priest. And it like the book, I think the book is wilder than the movie. But
Yes, I agree.
the movie is wild because you get like they have to visualize all this stuff. And when I read this book, I was so into it that I was visualizing things very differently. And then you look at late 1970s practical effects and they have to come up with a demonic pig, which
Yeah.
basically looks like a villain from the Muppet movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't look great, but um yeah, it's just it's a weird collection of things all bundled up into one just absolute publicity explosion. And you're left to wonder, do they remember this especially the kids, like you said, do they remember this happening, or did they simply hear the story so many times that they're like, well, that must have been what happened, because how else do you explain all of this, all of what the rest of my life has been, because I happened to be in that house for 4 weeks in 1975.
Yeah. And I just think, you know, the Lutzes had a lot to gain by talking about, but like they got famous, they got money. Like, so what were their motives? And it's just hard to think about that. And I also, it's just interesting you bring up the Warrens because the Warrens, I have a real issue with the Warrens. They were real pieces of shit. And it's easy to be like, oh, but they're because they're played by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. You're like, oh, they're
Yeah.
so charming and wonderful. They just exploited people who were a lot of people who were suffering, a lot of people who were kind of looking for the for financial gain, but they exploited a lot of people who were suffering. And there was also this guy, his name was Hans.
Hans Holzer.
Yeah, he was also another, I'm going to exploit the situation, bring in a medium and blame it all on an Indian burial ground fucking bullshit. So sorry.
No, that was
On my,
fine. It's fine.
getting on my, getting feisty. And they just exploiting tragedy and feeding into the media frenzy, which maybe benefited George and Kathy financially, but didn't benefit anyone else involved.
Yeah, it's such a tangled. Hans Holzer, for those who don't know, wrote a lot of follow-up Amityville books. Like I think his name is John G. Jones, who wrote sequels that were like this is what happened to George and Kathy after the house. Like he wrote a couple of things with their cooperation, but then Hans Holzer, who was a very famous paranormal investigator of the era, wrote a lot of books. I've got a couple of them up on my shelves. Um, he came in and wrote stuff sort of about the, like you said, about the wider community and about what was in Amityville and Long Island that could have influenced this haunting. I think one of his books is the inspiration for the third or fourth Amityville movie. But it got to the point like that leads me to another thing I wanted to talk about is like Amityville is a real place.
Yeah.
It is still a town on Long Island that you can go visit. That this house is still there. The address has been changed, and those famous quarter round windows are no longer there. But uh, it's the house is still there. The community is still there. People are just living in Amityville, trying to get through the day. Meanwhile, Amityville, because it's not a trademarked name, because it's the name of a place, has gone on to be the title in dozens of movies that have nothing to do with this story. Like there's a movie called Amityville Death Toilet now.
Oh my
which
God.
I haven't seen, but I know people who have seen it, and it's tied to this, and it's tied to like a real place that real people have lived and continue to live, and it all stems from this one thing, and you have to wonder like what did they think was going to happen? Because it wasn't it's just so fascinating to think about it with all of this stuff attached to it now. Like, and it all started, depending on who you believe, it either started with a haunting or it started with these two people. And there's one guy in the case, and I can't remember his name, but he was a lawyer who helped facilitate the book deal, I think.
Mm.
And he claimed later that this was just like they all got drunk one night and came up with this story and decided to sell it to a writer, which sounds insane, but it's also like you said, like, and it's in Danse Macabre, King's nonfiction sort of treatise on horror from the 80s. He talks about the film, the Amityville Horror, as this metaphor. Yeah, it's late 1970s financial anxiety, like the whole country's in a recession, we're rationing gas, everything is bad, but you still have to find a place for your family, and what happens when that turns out to be a total mess. That's there, but then and it ties back to what sounds like a family who needed money, who was ready to do this exploitative thing, which it's so much. Like we could be here for hours.
Yeah, and I just think like that's why it's continued to compel me for years because again, I grew up in New Jersey, so um probably my first like real fascination with horror on a deeper level was Weird New Jersey. So these are
Oh
real
yeah.
places around the state where my friends would drive. We'd go to Shades of Death Road and drive up and down the road, things like that. So like, but those things I reflect upon, but haven't had that lasting fascination the way Amityville does. And I think it's just because of all these layers and because who could have predicted that there would be sequels to the book, that there would be sequels to the movie, that it would catch on so much and we'd still be talking about it, 50 years later in a way that we're not talking about other places. And why is that? I think that's the question that I always wonder. And for me, it's the thing about the layers of the tragedy and also the children. But for for the masses, like why Amityville Death Toilet? Like why like I wonder like why has this particular story persevered for so long as because there's been other haunted houses. But why do we all know the name of Amityville? Why do we all know Ocean Ave? Why? And what's crazy is the house is not in a remote area. And
Yeah.
maybe this is part of it. It's in a very average suburban neighborhood. I mean, it's a big house, it's a nice house, but there's two houses on either side. And maybe it has to do with something like suburban anxiety or maybe it's the something about the family and the three kids and I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I think that's why it's just this itch that I had to scratch because why is this story so compelling over so many years? Why has it spawned so many sequels and books and all of that?
So I we this is a little sidebar, but I have to ask. I can't believe we've never talked about this, but I've also read a lot of the weird New Jersey stuff. And I am someone who for decades now, ever since Scariest Places on Earth on the Family Channel, has been obsessed by the Jersey Devil. So
Yeah.
did you ever go try hunting the Jersey Devil when you were growing up?
No, I mean, I knew about the Jersey Devil from the time I was from when I was very young, but he he lives in the Pine Barrens, which is south. And also, like, I don't know if you've ever seen that episode of The Sopranos. Like,
Oh hell yes.
you'll get lost in the Pine Barrens. Like there's something funky about the Pine Barrens. Like you'll walk in there and you will get lost and never walk out, which is crazy because New Jersey feels like such a densely populated state. You just forget you forget about the Pine Barrens. It's so strange. But no, I've never tried to hunt the Jersey Devil. He can find me if he wants to hang
Yeah,
out. He can come
yeah,
to Jersey City. We'll go get drinks.
yeah. Jersey Devil is fascinating to me, and I love how weird that story gets when you like really look at the eyewitness accounts because it's not. people like do fan art of the Jersey Devil where it looks like Chernabog from Fantasia, just like this muscly guy with horns and wings, and like no, the Jersey Devil is a horse goat Batman.
Yeah,
He's
it's the like original sketches from like the like 19 the hundreds, the like original description. It's like this looks like it's gonna be a character in like a Disney movie. Like
it
the funny
does.
sidekick.
It's so weird. Like it's anyway, that's a different story. It is interesting to me that like because we have these other haunted places, and I mean now haunted places are tourism sites.
Yeah.
It is very like ghost hunters will literally go around tour the country and rent places that are being rented specifically because they are haunted and they know that people want to spend the night in this haunted location. But most people would not be able to tell you all of the stuff about, Myrtle's Plantation or Trans-Allegheny Mental Asylum or all of these other places that loom as like, oh, it's the most haunted place in America, but everyone knows about Amityville. And it's funny to me because like if you go a little further up the Northeast, you get Salem, Massachusetts, which isn't known for hauntings, but is known for this sort of supernaturally tinged atrocity. And they have owned it. Like Salem is like, yeah, we're Salem. We're the Halloween capital of America. Everybody come here in the fall and get your have your witchy fun in Salem. But there aren't like a billion Salem movies where people are like, here's Salem Death Toilet. Um, but we have that with Amityville, and I think it's because it coincided with like everybody knows the tragedy of the Salem witch trials and that these people really did die in horrible ways after being like falsely accused of something. And it's awful and it's a tragedy, but it's so far back that we can kind of look and with great reverence go, yes, it was a
Mm.
terrible tragedy. And here is the memorial garden where all the victims were. This like six people were shot to death in their beds. And because it happened in the mid 1970s, it's a sensation. It's
Yeah,
it's
I
something about that.
I think you're right. When I was watching the Amityville origin documentary, I was thinking like people cannot make sense of this tragedy. They cannot make sense that the eldest son would go into the house, shoot both of his parents, shoot his two sisters and his two younger brothers. They can't make sense of it. And so there has to be something supernatural. There has to be something something to make it make sense because we cannot wrap our heads around what happened. And I think that's the root of the true crime craze where everybody was listening to true crime podcast. And I mean, it's still, I mean, people still love true crime. They're still fascinated by it. I'm still fascinated by it. But there was that really big boom, I'd say from like 2015 to 2020, like right
Yeah.
before the pandemic hit, where, My Favorite Murder was huge and everyone was going to everybody had a true crime podcast. And I think that's what it is. We're just, as human beings, we're so desperate to make sense of tragedy because we feel like it'll protect us from something. And I think with Amityville, that's just what it was. And I just read this book. Nick recommended it to me. It's called Ghost Lab. And I can't think of the author right now. It just came out recently. And it's about the spiritualist movement in the United States right now. And because people are losing faith in institutions. And so, and it's interesting because there's this rise of Christian nationalism, but I also think there's this rise on the other on the other side of that coin. There's this rise of spiritualism, where people are feeling so disenfranchised. They're looking to something bigger than themselves to put their faith in, and I think maybe this time that we're in now echoes the late '70s in terms of just being disenfranchised, right after Vietnam. And, there was a recession. And right now we're in this, this awful time. And so people are looking to bigger things to either throw themselves into, to have a belief in something else. And so I think maybe that it was the 1-2 of the how could this happen? How do we make sense of it? And then, the late 70s, like, well, it has to be the occult.
Yes. Yes. Which I love. I have a love-hate relationship with it because it's definitely come up where I grew up in Central Texas in a very sort of evangelist community. But I also love that very American idea that if anything comes along that's brutal and nasty that we can't explain, like, oh, they must have been Satanists. That's
Yeah.
just a thing from the 70s well into and it's coming back now. This is the other interesting thing is you mentioned the Christian nationalism, like that whole purity culture thing is coming back, where it's like, well,
Hmm.
you're not just a bad person, you're probably also a Satanist. It has to
Yeah.
have this, but I have a pet theory that I think that we're entering a new spiritualism golden age because spiritualism had its rise in the wake of the American Civil War, which was
Mm.
the largest mass casualty event that America had ever seen at that time, and it happened all on American soil, and it's similar to what happened like post World War I in Britain when everyone sort of had their, although it was happening before that too, so I should shut up about that. But I think that COVID created it created an environment very similar to the 1970s too, and that like we also had the post Nixon years where there was just a tremendous amount of governmental mistrust. But I think that the events of COVID have left so many people grappling with losses that they can't even begin to understand, and they're looking for some kind of outlet and going to something like spiritualism, which is such an open and accepting way of sort of dealing with death, um, is going to be more and more people, I think, find that attractive right now. But before we get too in the weeds on that, I did want to kind of go back because you mentioned reading the book. And I really cannot emphasize enough for listeners how nuts the book is. It really is just a crazy piece of haunted house fiction where they are like every 2 pages going like, and now there's green slime coming down the walls, and now I rolled over in bed and my wife was a hideous old hag, and it's
Exclamation point. There's so many
exclamation point.
exclamation points in this book.
I feel like every chapter ends with an exclamation point
Pretty much.
almost.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
I have very strong memories of two things from that book. One of which is in the movie and one of which is not. One is the well to hell
Yep.
that I still don't think they've ever found that in in the actual house, but there's a bit where they find this room that smells like decay, where the brick is painted blood red, and they have a friend there who goes into a trance and says that, oh, this is a path to hell. This is this is what's happening. There is a literal portal to hell under your house. That's why all this is happening to you. And that freaked me out. But then, so there's a lot of myth making in Amityville lore around the final night, the fabled final night, the thing that finally made them go, we're getting the hell out of here. And George and Kathy maintained that there were some things about that night that they would never tell anyone because it was too frightening. It was just too scary to ever say, even though we're going to say all this other stuff. But there's a bit in the book where George is like getting the kids and they're about to leave, and this like white figure stops at the top of the
Mm.
stairs and sort of slowly comes down towards them, and it's not like a benevolent white figure. It's just like the most terrifying ghost you've ever seen. And in the book, it absolutely got me, and I was very disappointed when I first saw the movie, and that's not in there. Um, just as a horror writer, and a horror fan, what like elements of the haunted house from the book jumped out at you?
It's crazy because there's just so many
There's so many.
that it's like it's kind of every trope that you can think of. Like I think the slime coming down the walls always felt very distinctly Amityville to me.
Hmm.
Like thinking about Amity, I think about the like walls bleeding and oozing, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty dope. And then the pig like Jody, the because that feels unique to me too. I mean, and George was always cold in the house,
Hmm.
which I'm like, I'm always cold. Like I was like, I relate to that. But like that, like everyone being like, no, the house feels fine. Like I'm freezing. That stuck out to me. Obviously, I think about the flies and the priest being told to get out. Those are kind of the staples of the story to me. That, but I think the pig demon named Jody and the walls oozing slime. Like to me, when I think Amityville, those are the two things that I think about.
So we've talked a little bit about uh, Ed and Lorraine Warren and the way that they were able to parlay all of their quote unquote investigations into financial opportunities, which um you mentioned the movies, and it's a very weird line for me to draw, but I have to draw a line in my head between fictional Ed and Lorraine and real Ed
Yeah.
and Lorraine because I do love Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga so much.
And they're so good. The Conjuring movies are great and they're
Oh
great
yeah,
in them. Those
I'm s-
characters are great too.
I'm so looking forward to The Conjuring Last Rites and my horror mommy and horror daddy coming back for one more ride. Um, and we've talked about the weirdness of this pop culture phenomenon that has grown out of something that real people experienced. And it's obvious it's not the only example of that, but it is one of the biggest examples. I get the sense talking to you that you don't believe a word of the haunting story. Is that
I
I'm where I'm getting at what I'm getting at is I'm curious like how you feel about haunted houses. Are you a believer? Are you a skeptic? Do you fall somewhere in between?
I do believe in haunted places. I believe in energy. Like I have had an experience with a ghost that like was validated from a friend who like had no idea that I was going through it until I brought it up and was able to like say specifics of the experience I had.
Hmm.
So I believe in ghosts. I believe in energy. I've lived places where I'm like, there's bad energy. Like, there's bad energy here. It's the same like if you go to a party and you're like, I don't want to be here. Sometimes you walk into a house and it's empty and you're just like, I don't like it in here. There's something about this place. I believe in that. Do I believe that George and Kathy Lutz experienced this haunting in this house? No. I think maybe the house had bad energy? Yes. Do I think George had bad energy? Yes. But the amount of things in the book that were, if if they were just like it was a haunted house, that's one thing. They clearly embellished. They clearly embellished their story. Like the hoof prints in the snow that they claim, like the neighbors on either side are so close that they would be able to look out the window and be like, there's fucking hoof prints in the snow. And
Yeah.
they both were like, there was no hoof prints in the snow. Like, so I think that there's definitely the possibility that it was haunted. Do I think that evil spirits, do I believe the like burial ground, all of America is a burial ground? Like
Yeah.
I I think that whatever happened there, they exploited the tragedy to their own financial gain. And so regardless of whether they, it was creepy or bad things happened and it didn't feel nice, I think that I think both things can be true. It could have been haunted, but I don't believe everything that they said was true, and I believe that they I don't agree with what they did morally.
Yeah. It should be noted, by the way, that like I said, the house is still there. Multiple families have lived in it since the Lutzes. None of them have ever said anything about paranormal activity, which is actually addressed in the documentary I was talking about, where people will ask, like, well, why hasn't the haunting continued? If it was so bad and so persistent for 28 days, why isn't it there anymore? And Lorraine Warren's reasoning is sound if you believe Lorraine Warren, which was she said, well, we exercised the house. We cleaned it. We cleaned it. They're gone. The bad stuff's gone. We took care of it. Like that's why it was haunted and now it's not, which is uh it's a good reason if you follow her logic, I guess.
There's no way
It
to disprove it, so it's
Yeah,
good
there's
to.
no way to disprove it.
That's why it's a smart thing to say.
It's also interesting. You mentioned the hoof prints in the snow. There's at least one skeptic who did tried to do it like a day by day timeline of the events as they're depicted in the book, and then like checked the weather reports and said, well, according to the weather reports from that time, there was no snow on the ground that day. So I
Yeah.
don't know how you saw hoof prints in snow. But this leads me to something that when you were last here, we talked about Jaws and we talked about the water and how you felt you would deal with the presence of an actual shark. And this is funny because last night, my wife and I were watching a TV show, a comedy that has nothing to do with the paranormal, but these people are shopping for a house and the realtor tells, and it's their dream house. It's exactly what they want. And the realtor tells them, I do have to disclose to you that a triple homicide happened here, and they just kind of go, "Oh, we'll take it. We're fine. I don't care. It's our perfect house. We want it." And that's part of what happened with George and Kathy, which they were like, "No, it was a great deal. We couldn't pass it up." Which maybe they were like, "Oh, there was a murder here. We could do something with this." Which
Yeah.
is funny because it ties into that everything is content sort of feeling that is in Play Nice. This idea that you could turn this into something. Um, would you? And so my wife asked me, like, would you move into a murder house if it was the right house, if you liked it? And I said, well, it would depend on the individual circumstances behind the murder. But yeah, I think I would buy a house that someone was murdered in. Would you?
It's interesting because when my husband and I were first looking for houses, I mean, this was a couple years ago, I saw this one house and I showed it to him. And then, he was like, oh, I don't know. And then a couple days later, he was like, oh, I just realized that's the axe murder house. Apparently, a husband murdered his wife with an axe in that house and like somehow got off. But like, so maybe he allegedly murdered his wife, I should say, with an axe in the basement of that house. And so I was like, oh, it's a good price though. Like as a millennial, you're just like a house. I'll take it. I don't, again, I think the circumstances matter and the price matters, but I think if I walked into the house and it didn't have bad energy, I'd be like, okay. I mean, because somebody's died where we sit now. Like
Yeah.
we can't, death everywhere all the time. We just put it underground and we don't look at it and we forget about it. But I think, yeah, I don't think I'd be discouraged if it wasn't like, if somebody was like, somebody died in this bedroom. Like, well, how violently and what were the circumstances? But no, if I needed someplace to live and the price was right, and then I mean, I guess it's different for me too, though, because if it was haunted, then that's a book for me, and I just write that off on my taxes.
This is true. I did have that thought. I did not say this out loud to my wife, although she edits the podcast, so she'll hear me say this later. I did sort of think like, well, if nothing happens, nothing happens. But if something happens, hey,
Cha-ching! Yeah.
I've got something which uh in talking about all of this and like thinking in terms of haunted houses and the lore that builds up, like I want to just bring this back to like this is a community of people that are still dealing with the fallout of this thing. And it
Mm.
reminds me of, I swear there's a book in this and one day I'll write it, but in my hometown uh of Rosebud, Texas, which is a town of 1,500 people, there was a haunted house that is now no longer there. And the only reason I know this is my dad told me a story because he knew the family that had lived there, or one of the families that had lived there. And he told me the lore is that this guy, who was not a believer in ghosts, not a particularly woo-woo kind of person, a very blue-collar guy, apparently saw something in that house one night and immediately walked into the bedroom and told his wife, "We're moving. We're not gonna stay here anymore. I don't care what we have to do. We're just gonna move." And I asked my dad, like, what did he see? And my dad, who I can't really tell how much he believes in things like that. He likes conspiracy theories, but I don't know about ghosts. But my dad said, "Oh, he never told anyone what he saw. He never even told his wife what he saw. He just said, 'Trust me, we have to go.'" And that was where the story ended. And so my brain was always firing like, what was in
Well,
that
what is
house?
it?
What the
Yeah.
hell could have made? Because I knew the family, I knew the guy, and I'm like, that's not a guy who spooks easy. Like what on earth could have happened? And the coda to the story is that that house eventually burned down. It's I believe it's still a vacant lot in the town. I don't think anyone ever built anything else on the property. So that's I always just have that like, whoa, what could have happened? Um, and it's just so, again, it goes back to, it's so wild that like every town has that story. Every town has a version of that. Because like you said, this country is built on blood, right? Like we're not only are we dealing with like death dating back to prehistory, we're a country that is built on spilled blood. I live in Texas where we have our own revolution that we love to talk about that happened, and slavery and a billion other things. So every town has this story, but this is the story that became the story. Um, we've already talked endlessly about this story's influence on Play Nice, but I'm just curious now that we've like had this hour of unpacking it, if anything else is jumping out at you as like, oh, I didn't even realize like how deep I was playing with that in Play Nice. Like what's present for you? As my therapist would say, Rachel Harrison, what's present for you right now?
I think, there's this interesting thing where I can, with anyone who's interested in true crime, I think there's needs to be a reckoning there of, you know, even if you understand, like, well, I'm trying to understand the human emotion and the human, like, the rationale behind it, to because we all exist and are trying to make sense of it. Like, I can give myself grace for that, but there is some voyeurism, and there is some, like, no matter what, we human beings have an interesting relationship to tragedy, and I think we like to be tragedy adjacent. And I liken it to stretching before exercise. Like, we know that we're not going to exist on this earth unscathed, and are trying to understand what can happen, and stand there and watch other people deal with it. So I think, in writing Play Nice, I think there's some of that too, where the book is a lot about perception, and it's easy to be judgmental. And again, even with George and Kathy Lutz, like, I can sit here and be like, I don't think what they did was morally right, but also, like, I don't know what their circumstances were. I don't know what, George was a Vietnam vet. I don't know what he went through. Kathy was a single mother with 3 kids. So I I can disagree, but I try not to judge. And I think the Warrens I judge, um, Hans I judge, because I think that was purposely exploitative. But I try and have empathy for everybody in the situation, and particularly the DeFeo family. And I just, my heart goes out to their loved ones, and you know, I think it's important to just remember that they were real people and not just ghosts.
Did writing Play Nice change the way that you view? I don't want to say true crime because that's not exactly what we're talking about here. But did writing Play Nice shift the way you look at like you turn on the TV and the Travel Channel has 400 shows about haunted places? Do you feel like it altered your perception of that stuff at all writing this book?
I think it's just made me think a little bit deeper about it. Instead of mindless entertainment, I'm always a little bit like, how desperately do these people need to believe that the haunting is real? And what's going on in their lives that brought them to this point? And uh, is their belief harming anybody? And all of that. I think it's made me approach the situations with a little more nuance instead of just like I'm just gonna sit here and drool out the side of my mouth while I my eyeballs absorb this.
Yeah. Uh, so the book is Play Nice. It is out September 9th. I think this episode is coming out September 10th, which means it's out there. If you don't have it, go get it. You will get to read Rachel ruminating on all this and more, but in that fun, approachable, uh, endlessly entertaining Rachel Harrison style that you get from all of her other books. So it's not a bummer, I promise. It's a very fun. I'm gonna cut that part out, Rachel. I'm sorry.
Okay, no.
That was weird. I always try to because sometimes we get into very heavy stuff on the show, and I always try to emphasize like, but we're still having fun.
Yeah,
It's still,
no, I do the same thing. I'm always like, and my book is about childhood trauma, but it's fun.
but it's fun. Yes, it is fun. Uh, like I said, it's out September 9th. This will probably go up September 10th. I know you have a bunch of events coming up to promote the book. So here at the end of the show, will you let people know where they can find you online and where they might be able to see you doing events for Play Nice?
So I'm on Instagram at Rachel Harrison's Ghost. My website is rachel-harrison.com. I have an events page on my website. I'm going on a pretty big tour. So I'll be in New York, Texas, Indiana, some other spots in the Midwest. I'll be going to LA. I'll be going to Utah. So I'll be bopping around. So if you want to hang out, oh, Atlanta, Nashville. Yeah. So if you're interested, go to my events page. I would love to hang out.
All right. Our guest has been Rachel Harrison. Rachel, always great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks once again to Rachel Harrison for being on the show. Always great to talk to her. Play Nice is available now wherever books are sold. It's a lot of fun. You should get it. You should also follow Rachel on her various social media. She's really fun on Instagram. She's also on Blue Sky and around other places. Great follow. Always keep up with what Rachel's got going on because it's always worth it. And if you want to keep up with everything we have going on, the best way to do that is to follow us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. That is where you will find posts with every episode we do, as well as new guest announcements, giveaways. Whenever we have giveaways going on, they usually happen over there on Blue Sky. So hop over there, give us a follow. You can also follow us on Facebook. We're the Scares That Shaped Us there. And you can follow us on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to your podcasts on YouTube, go search The Scares That Shaped Us. Like and subscribe. You'll get every episode that way. We also have a newsletter. All you have to do to sign up is go to MatthewJacksonWrites.com. That's Writes as in WRITES, because I'm a writer. Get it? MatthewJacksonWrites.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. It is all horror all the time. I post every episode of the show there. I post new book reviews. I just posted an appreciation of the work of friend of the show, Valkyrie LaCrue, over there. You can go check that out. Film essays. I'm planning some really cool stuff for October for Halloween. All of that and more on the newsletter. Right now, all of the content is absolutely free. You can go over there, type in your email, and you get everything that I've been publishing so far. As we get a little more mature in the newsletter phase and we keep adding more stuff, there will be some stuff available for paid subscribers only. If you want to be a paid subscriber, you can chip in as little as $1 to help us keep this show going. I do this show ad-free, completely as a labor of love. As we keep growing, we want to upgrade our gear. We want to upgrade our setup. We want to make sure that we're giving you the best show possible. So chipping in a little bit of money is a nice way to do that, but you absolutely don't have to. I appreciate it if you just go over there, put in your email address, sign up for free, and read the stuff I'm writing because I'm excited about it. I've got some cool stuff planned. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. Our guest will be Keith Rawson. We are going to talk to Keith about his rad as hell new vampire novel, Coffin Moon, which just came out this week. You should go pick that up. And we're going to dig into another Stephen King story. We've been big on Stephen King on this podcast lately. We're going to talk about one of the lesser discussed Stephen King stories. We're going to talk about the Tommyknockers, the impact it had on Keith and his fiction and his imagination. It's a great conversation, and that will be on the feed September 17th at noon Central. So I hope you look out for that. That's it for us this week. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.